And it's been great to see that the donors are prioritizing that from a funding point of view. So now we really need to look at the messaging and the execution to get that generation to be as circumcised as possible. The new target calls for 27 million additional circumcisions by 2020. And so that's a lot. So far, we've gotten 12 million. One imagines the first communities we went after were the easiest. So we not only have to double, but we have to draw in lots of additional communities. So this is a incredible challenge, but something with a huge payoff. Now, these prevention tools, as much as we will do new things with them, they won't be enough. And that's part of the reason why the R&D side continues to be very important. Our foundation funds both delivery activities, including being a partner with Global Fund and other things, but also quite a bit at the research level. And there are some promising advances in the R&D pipeline. The idea of antiretrovirals that last a long time, where you might put them into a rod or you might take an injection only every 3 months. I think those profiles will let us do far better prevention. Also, of course, we're making progress on a vaccine. I wish I could tell you that these new tools were around the corner, that they'll be available in the next 2 or 3 years. But unfortunately, even in the 5 or 6 year time frame, it would take good luck for these to be available. We need to speed up the trials, make sure that we only have necessary regulatory delays. We also need to look at the funding on this front. I think it is unfortunate that the research funding also has been flatlined. And you can see from this diagram, you go back even 8 or 9 years, we've been at about the same level. There's some incredible scientific insights coming out of this, but I think the payoff to creating these new tools will prove to be dramatic. And funding is one of the elements that will determine how quickly we get there. So we need to make the case, not only for maintaining what we've got, but also getting increases here. We urgently need to take these things forward because every day that passes, over 5,000 lives are changed forever. Now, as we move forward, anything we do must include effective campaigns to counter the stigma and discrimination that continue to undermine our efforts to beat this epidemic. So the final area, besides prevention and treatment, is to gain a deeper understanding of the social and cultural dynamics around this disease. And that's, I'm sure, many of the breakouts, a lot of the posters I saw out there, are many of you working hard to understand exactly how we can communicate better, what we need to do to reach out. And in no way is there a single solution to this. It's a very complicated area. And that's why prevention efforts that engage with specific at-risk communities and address their distinct circumstances, like the Avahan project, which was in India, targeting sex workers there, that kind of thing has proven way more effective than the broad communication prevention campaigns. Those programs are hard to design, hard to execute on, but will be critical. Understanding the barriers that inhibit take-up. Do the tools fit people's daily routines? And it was sobering sitting with some young girls here in Durban to hear the challenges they face. They certainly felt they needed to be covert in their prevention activities, and only a few of the tools we have on the drawing board will fully achieve that. Our knowledge gaps are probably greatest when it comes to women and girls. We simply don't have enough data about what directly and indirectly increases their HIV risk. Gender inequality, forced and early marriage, sexual violence, lack of education. As my wife Melinda said recently, there's either no data, or even where data exists, it often doesn't really look at the women and girls in a specific way, and so it misses their unique circumstances. The PEPFAR Dreams program and complementary country initiatives by the Global Fund are aimed at helping reduce some of these gaps. So that's a very welcome initiative. Once we get that information, then we need to design the response. And particularly for young women, sex workers, men who have sex with men, people who use drugs, all of these communities, we really need not only to understand more, but execute in a more dramatic way. Only if we dramatically reduce new infections across all these key populations will the AIDS epidemic decline. Without huge efficiencies in treatment and prevention, new tools, increased funding, including something a lot of us are working on, which is the Global Fund to get replenished at its full goal. Only with all of these things coming together in the right way will we have a next generation with less HIV than the previous one. We need to challenge ourselves here. A lot of the things we're doing, we can keep doing, but that alone clearly will not be enough. So I am an optimist. I'm an optimist that we can bring about the end of AIDS. I'm an optimist about the tools. I'm an optimist about the incredible dedication by the people I see here. So we need to bring that all together, all of those strengths, all the people are committed to this. Only by doing that in a way that's, I think, proving more difficult than we expected, but if we do that, then we can turn this promise of an AIDS-free world from an aspiration into a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. You really have given us, at this point in our time-space continuum, a point at which we can make a difference. And I think you've given us a sense of the optimism and the way forward and how to think about it. So I'm going to start off this panel discussion by trying to get us to discuss some of the key issues emerging from Bill's speech. But I'm going to do so, and I'm going to try and keep us some time towards the latter part of the session where you can also have an opportunity to ask questions. And when I do so, I'll indicate so that you can go to one of the mics that has a number on it. So let me start off with Nduku. So Nduku, you've just heard what Mr. Gates has to say. You deal with the challenges of HIV in a very real way every day in Kenya. You're having to implement all of these technologies. You're having to put plans together, get the resources, and make it happen. Tell us, how do you do it? What are the challenges you have to grapple with in making all this happen?
Thank you very much. I think I'll start by saying that whenever you think about a country, you think about the people that are working in it, you think about the recipients, and then you think about all the people that are putting in resources to support. But importantly, you have to think about the government that has the systems to deliver what is required. So perhaps the first thing I'll say is, in terms of what we need to do, is to be able to take a step back and ask ourselves some questions. How do we move from the efficacy of the products that we have now and start to bring them to efficiency and effectiveness, particularly effectiveness, even before we talk efficiency? And I think there are three ways to do that. The first one is that we really, with regard to prevention, we really do not have a very good understanding of who we are targeting and where they are in country. So we have a lot of very good products. We do not have very clear targets. So for instance, if we were to ask, as coming from the national level, what is the number that we should be working at, or what is the target that would say Kenya has achieved epidemiologic control? Is it one case as in reported as in polio, or is it 500,000? Is it 1 in 100,000? And often when you don't have clarity of a goal, it's very hard to harness everybody. The second thing that I think is really important, we have a lot of partners working together. We have a lot of services being delivered and a lot of products. It is really important that we start to have good measurements. What is not measured does not get done. When it comes to prevention, we don't have really good indicators, and we do not necessarily have the systems to be able to report them. The third part, which I think is really critical, is about how we deliver prevention. We need to get consistent, as well as also be able to have systems for delivering prevention. So Bill talked about the products we have, condoms and oral PrEP. Half the time when you think about treatment, you're able to know how many pills you need, where they need to go, the supply chain system, the capacity of the workers required. We don't necessarily have that for instance, something like condoms. So, and how that is reported back. And so when those systems are not there, it becomes really difficult to have a sustainable response. And so you have a lot of investment, you have a lot of programs, as we have talked about Kenya and the successes that we've had, reducing our numbers of new infections by almost 20% in the last 3 years. But then you find areas such as young people whose infections are going up while the rest of the adult population is going down. But also in those young people, which is the question of who are they? We had 35,000 new infections among young people. But who are they out of the 7.6 million? Can I figure them out so that next time we can address them? And the final, and I think really important thing, is to reflect back on the role of government in managing HIV prevention. Currently, a lot of prevention is done ad hoc and without necessarily the management and oversight of government. I think about about 2 years ago when we did an evaluation of what was happening in Homa Bay, which has a 25% prevalence in Kenya. For those who know you, it's a county. And we found that almost 80% of the funded partners, who are around 33 partners, were covering about geographically 30% of the geographic coverage. So that has started to change, but starting to change took government to say the county is going to call partners, you have to work differently. And so investing in government is really essential. And just reflecting on where we are at with immunization. Immunization has consistent coverage over the last almost, or better coverage. And partly it's because there is ownership and there has been systems to keep doing that on an ongoing basis. So all said and done, we must work smarter, we must invest in systems for prevention, and we must also be able to understand who and what we are preventing. Thank you.
Ndugu, you've sort of captured for us that we've really got to understand what we're trying to achieve, who we're trying to achieve it with, what are the systems to make this happen, and what are the partnerships to all of this. So let me move on to Bill. In talking about all of these things that we've got to try and achieve, and you are aware better than any of us about the global fiscal constraints that we're going to have to deal with. In our own country, we're anticipating a growth rate of 0.1%. So we know this challenge. So we've got to try and achieve more with the money we have. We've got to look for efficiencies in what we can achieve. And at the same time, yesterday when you were at the Caprisa Clinic in the city center, you were talking to young women and you got a sense of what is this all going to take. So give me a sense of how you feel we could do all of this and do it more efficiently.
Well, certainly there's a lot of distractions, economic distractions, political distractions, the challenges of the Middle East, Syrian-driven refugee crisis that both in that region is hard, and for the European governments who are taking people in, which is a great thing, but challenges them. If it wasn't for the AIDS community speaking up and reminding people there is an AIDS emergency. This money really is having a very big impact. If it wasn't for that, we'd be at zero. So it, actually keeping the funding for PEPFAR and Global Fund and the R&D, I'd give us a pretty strong grade in the face of both the economic turmoil and other things going on. I'm still hopeful that we can get modest increases on both the delivery side and and there's a few governments who are to be applauded for their generosity. Germany and the UK and many others have shown a very good trend. The US, of course, is by far the biggest funder on both fronts, which is an amazing thing. Per case, though, if we're going to treat twice as many people, we're essentially going to have to do it twice as efficiently. The South African budget is prioritizing these things, but it won't be able to increase a lot. I don't know the Kenya budget, but I imagine the idea of doubling what we get just isn't in the cards. So it does force you to step back and say, wow, doubling the efficiency. And it's really personnel costs, it's tracking costs. But if we say within this system, are there best practices, community groups in Malawi, dozens of best practices, very targeted things that are twice as efficient either in prevention or treatment, then we do see that now that we're more data oriented. So it is possible if we bring the best practices into the mainstream.
Great. So talking about best practices and about how to get a better bang for your buck, and realizing that we're not even halfway there in terms of the number of people we need to treat. And if we're going to treat everybody, we're really going to have to do so much more efficiently. So we also recognize, and let me turn to you, Linda Gale, that if we simply are going to take the approach that we are going to deal with this epidemic with the current tools, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we are going to have to scale up and continue doing so with all the challenges that involves, without having the benefit of innovation that gives us more efficiencies, gives us higher efficacies. Now, you saw from the diagram that the investment in research and development is plateauing. And you've been doing amazing research looking at PrEP, looking at prevention. You want to just paint for us things in the sort of R&D landscape that we can think about that may enhance our ability to really reach a point in this HIV epidemic that we can sort of see in the horizon somewhere that there's an end in sight.
Sure. Thank you, Slim, and thanks, Bill, for really giving us a great overview. I think where we are in Nduku, for giving us hope in Africa as to, how countries can really take this seriously and move it forward. I think the way I think about it, Slim, is that every single sort of aspect of this needs R&D. So even the stuff we need to do today, and there's no doubt we need to take it to scale, that can be improved, and there's R&D around how you take it to scale. So I know at this conference we're talking about self-testing. That will enable us to reach more people. Those tests can be improved. In this conference we're talking about differentiated models of care. That will enable us to get more people onto treatment with the efficiencies that Bill is saying we need to find. So I think there's stuff that really needs to be done, and money is required to get that work done around how we improve what we already know. And then there are some fantastic new good ideas that need to be optimized. So definitely oral PrEP is in that group. And oral PrEP is absolutely part of combination prevention today. We know it works. In the same way that we know harm reduction works, and we know that these other tools that are very important are there, but even there we can see some optimization. So my passion, as you know, is adolescents. We know that adolescents struggle to take a daily pill, but I'm excited that within the research field, we're saying this can be improved. And so certainly there are individuals who will do better if there's less frequent dosing. or if the dosing isn't actually swallowing an oral pill. We've seen work that has, for example, developed vaginal rings, allowing a more depot approach. There are some very exciting molecules coming down the line, which means we may even be able to go to even less frequent than a depot 8-weekly injection, both for treatment and prevention, that I think could revolutionize our prevention revolution. So I think that R&D is really important. So on the one hand, what we know can be improved and scaled. What we have recently discovered can certainly be optimized. And then, of course, very important is that we keep our eye on the ultimate goal of a prophylactic vaccination or a vaccination scheme that allows us, that a young woman or a young man, a key pop, Michael's talk this morning was heart-rending. The fact that today, even as we're sitting, 300 young women will have been infected in this country alone is unacceptable. So, getting those tools into those individuals' hands where maybe a shot in the arm, forget about HIV for a year or so, before you need to get your booster shot, that's the world we really, really need. We're not going to get there unless we continue to invest in R&D. And if you're an optimist, Larry Corey's talk this morning would really have kind of enhanced that optimism. We are poised. We are there. There is fantastic tools coming in the door. We've got to keep the money flowing to make that promise come true. And then, of course, not forgetting the cure agenda, because the treatment pool is growing. And, getting those efficiencies, we're going to be able to reach more efficiencies, but there'll become a time when we just cannot get any more efficiencies. And then clearly, if we can reduce the number of people who need treatment or give people remission holidays where treatment can be held, that is, again, very important. So all of these work streams need to be going forward. They require resources.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, when we look at the current state of the HIV epidemic, we are seeing particularly disturbing numbers in terms of the new HIV infections. I was very disappointed to see the latest UNAIDS statistics that 2.1 million people became HIV positive last year. The same number that became HIV positive in 2014. So we're not making that kind of headway. And that's despite the way in which we have been scaling up treatment and so on. So to me, it highlights this importance that we've got to continue innovation. We can't become complacent. We've got to look to the future. So perhaps I can turn to Bill to ask you to comment on, there are some very fundamental challenges in innovation. Some of those are about how do we get the 16, 17 million people that don't know they have HIV? How do we actually get them into a position where they do? And you touched on this in your talk. You touched on the importance of that group, because if we don't get to that group, everything else we discuss is up in the air. And then when we have them, how do we ensure that they are able to access healthcare? How do we create the implementation efficiencies and the implementation science to drive it? So let me ask you to comment. How do you see an R&D agenda? How do you see us moving forward with new tools? Is it about new drugs? Is it about new diagnostics, or some combination of those?
Well, the most single important tool is the vaccine. And there are many tracks, many design approaches that are likely to give us a vaccine. The challenge is that even the furthest along of those will probably require 2 iterations that will be 4 to 5 years long before it's a fully effective vaccine. When we say the word vaccine, people always think of the vaccines we use that are extremely effective. So for example, in malaria, we got a first-generation vaccine, but its duration is limited enough that its main benefit, as it explains to us, how to make a second-generation vaccine. It won't be used, it won't make a dramatic difference in the field. And we're not even really that far along. We have a hint of some effectiveness in our RV-144, and now we're following up on that. So there's 4 or 5 different approaches, but each of them, unless we're surprisingly lucky, would require those 2 turns. If we can make each turn 4 years, that would be doing good work, because historically it's been even longer than that. The other thing besides the vaccine are super long-acting drugs. And as was said, these are super interesting because they're both valuable tools on the prevention front and on the treatment front. So if I could get, a rod, like is sometimes used in reproductive health, that released one drug, that would be a preventative tool. If I could have a rod that released 3 drugs, that would be a treatment tool. And so whether it's antibodies or new classes of drugs like TAF, where the amount you need per day is quite modest, that's the kind of thing that in these breakthrough formats may be effective for us. I'd say those are the 2 most exciting things, are long-acting drugs, including antibodies, and the vaccine work. And amazing science. Our understanding, we understand AIDS better than we understand some diseases we have great vaccines for. It's just a very hard one to design a vaccine because it is a disease of the immune system.
Right. A vaccine and long-acting drugs. Great. Okay, so I'm now going to invite you, the audience, to ask your questions. So can you come up to the microphones, and I'll take you after the next comment from Nduku. So Nduku, just comment. You are having to deal with one of the greatest challenges we have in Africa, which is young women. And you're having to figure out what is it we can do. And you're trying to think about innovations, but at the same time, you're trying to think about rolling out what we have. Just your quick thoughts about, how do we prioritize this group? What do we need to think of first when we think about how do we slow HIV in this important group?
Thank you. I think there is the long term, which is the change in norms and the gender equality. That is long term, but we also have to start breaking it down into what are the actions now that will get us there. We kind of tend to talk about it, but we haven't actually drawn a pathway to it. The more important thing in terms of what we need to do now, I think, is in terms of being able to put services out there. It always fascinates me that my illiterate auntie, who is, in the village, she lost her husband, is able to go buy, she knows where to buy a 20 shilling, 10 shilling, Kenya shilling, which is perhaps about a pence of airtime. She knows where to load it. She knows how to do hash *254. And the fact that she doesn't know where to buy a condom is problematic. The fact that a young person in the village, young girl, young boy, who is getting into this age, does not know where to be able to access a service or a product that we are saying will help them prevent themselves is a problem. So our marketing strategies must change. We must be able to start to deliver the products in a way that people begin to want them, are interested in using them, and we teach them how to use it. We actually invest in doing that. And I think, the air communication companies are really something to teach us how we can do that. The third piece in terms of being able to put services out there comes back to the question of smart investments and being able to ask ourselves, what is it that we have lost somewhere along the way? We started off with campaigns for treatment, for testing and counseling, campaigns where we said everyone must know their HIV status. And today everyone says, well, they were a waste of money. But when I look at the numbers that there are, most of the young people you've just described do not know their HIV status, only about half in just about most of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa. But we are not driving knowledge, the knowledge of HIV status, whether it is by self-testing or whatever other mechanism and product that is there. information, just correct knowledge on HIV. Most demographic health surveys are showing between 50 to 70% of correct knowledge. That is very problematic. So, and we are not driving that kind of information. So until we kind of go back to the basics and say, let's flood information out there, let's avail services, let people know where to get a service. When I was young, I knew where to get a VCT because it was in my face, it was all over, and I had to get tested. So that is where our investment will be, and it will only happen. And I think I will say this, and be sustainable if we build the systems for it, and that is through government. The only way to ensure accountability is to strengthen the systems of accountability.
Great. I love it when I hear comments like we're going to increase the accountability of the system, and we're going to make it responsive to the actual needs. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we have a few minutes available for you to ask any of the panel members a question. So let me start with number 2. Mic number 2.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Can you say who you are first, please?
Yes, I'm Howard Armstead. I've been HIV positive for 32 years. I've been an AIDS researcher for 25 years. And perhaps most importantly, I've been an advocate for people, for affordable treatments for people in Africa since 1994. I want to address, my question concerns best practices and bang for the buck. For over 16 years, science has proven that the mineral selenium can slow HIV progression from becoming AIDS, according to AIDS Journal, by 48%. Harvard University and the Nigerian Institute for Medical Research showed that adding selenium to ARVs in advanced AIDS patients more than doubled the increase in CD4 count compared to ARVs alone. However, most people in HIV care and treatment are not aware of those scientific facts. Today, 17 million people, mostly in Africa, who are lacking any treatment at all, could benefit from selenium, as well as most of those who are already on HIV. My question is, has hope or expectation of a perfect solution, like test and treat, prevented us from utilizing currently available beneficial solutions to achieve
The question is about selenium and its value in treatment. So let's go to mic number 4. Quick, can I get your question? I'm not going to be able to get enough questions in. We're going to take a few questions and then pose them to the panel. Go ahead, mic number 4.
All right, thank you. My name is Bashir Lumala, and I come from Uganda. I thank my neighbor Ndugu from Kenya and all the panelists. The question I have is, you have mentioned that there are elements and components in R&D that could be optimized to improve access, understanding, and adoption of new treatment and the new tools. My question is, to what level and extent do the small and medium companies in Africa, which role do they have to play to improve this access? Do we see them as stakeholders, and which role will they be playing in this campaign? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's really difficult up here to hear what's being said. So I'm just going to quickly summarize so that the panel members can hear. So the first question is about the potential value of selenium in the context of antiretroviral treatment. The second question was about, as we think about innovation, what's the potential contribution that small and medium enterprises in Africa can contribute to that? Okay, so let's go to mic number 3.
Hi, my name is Hannah Mercader. I'm a master's student studying global health in Canada, and I'm currently doing practicum in Mozambique with a nonprofit called Kwangasana. My question is regarding the many health innovations that are being developed and implemented around the world. I find that they're still concentrated in more urban areas, and funders and innovators are still very hesitant to distribute their tools or innovations in hard-to-reach and rural areas. So for example, transportation might be very difficult and expensive, and so a funder doesn't want to go there. So and you could argue that the communities in these areas are the ones that need them the most. So I'm just just wondering what your thoughts are on how we can better provide services to these hard-to-reach areas.
So the question is about access in those hard-to-reach communities. What can we be doing to try and get services access to them? We have just 3 minutes left in the session, so thank you very much to all of you. I'm not going to be taking any more questions. What I am going to do is I'm going to ask each of the panel members to just make some closing comments and to address any of the 3 questions that we've heard here in the course of this small session. So let me start off. Linda Gale, your thoughts, just some closing remarks and any answers you want to give.
So I think my quick remark would be that primary prevention is absolutely key, but part of primary prevention is also secondary prevention, which does mean that we also need to enhance how we get treatment out to people. And so around getting treatment to people who are having trouble getting access, I think again we need research and development, but we are, in this conference you'll be hearing about exciting things such as moving drugs to where people are rather than moving the people to where the drugs are, moving other access. As Nduku was speaking, I was thinking you can get contraception from a vending machine in Switzerland. I don't understand why we can't get contraception and PrEP from a vending machine in South Africa. Those are the innovations that I think we really need to see coming up from conferences like this and in between. I can't agree more that if we are going to reach 34 million people for treatment, we're going to have to think outside of health facilities. And if we're going to get prevention to as many people as possible, we're going to have to be innovative about how we package and get those services out there.
Okay, thank you very much. Nduku, some closing remarks.
I think just thinking back where we are coming from, we learned a lot from communities of people living with HIV. I don't think we would have the kind of treatment coverage rates if we didn't have treatment literacy, peer groups, people living with HIV talking to their peers and saying you must go and get treatment. The question I ask is, why can't we do the same for prevention? We can work with communities of people living with HIV because they are key to prevention, and be able to have prevention literacy programs and peer for prevention programs that will really actually begin to change the landscape of prevention. And the second part of it is, as we do that, we must continue to have smart investments. One of the areas that I think hasn't been raised sufficiently enough in this conference is about ensuring that we fully fund the Global Fund. Because if we do not do that, we will continue to be in a pretty difficult space, especially as far as building systems for prevention goes. We will not do it without systems. It will be ad hoc, and it disappears when the project disappears if there is no system. Thank you.
Fully fund the Global Fund. Yeah, 3 cheers to that. Bill, let's give you the last comment.
Well, I don't know anything about selenium, but I'm always open-minded that we should dig into. Is there something there that's been missed? It's worth pursuing every angle, and so we can definitely do that. In terms of how we get people engaged in treatment and prevention, we should try small and medium business. I don't know if that's a forum that people can talk openly about these things. Some connection through religious groups has been fantastic. I think in other disease areas like polio, we found that absolutely critical to the fact that we haven't had a case of polio here in Africa for over 2 years. Never would have gotten there without both technology and religious leaders. So the idea of thinking innovatively about how this social outreach works, I've seen in one place, Avahama, the sex workers, that when it was designed properly, it worked very, very well. And it had ancillary benefits that went beyond even its pure HIV goals. So that's the kind of innovation that I think the numbers we were all sitting here staring at soberly force us to think in a creative way.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've now heard from our panel, you've heard from the person who is one of our strongest advocates for global health, Bill Gates. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.